Hi.
Okay.
Is this on?
Yeah, testing.
Is this thing on?
Yeah, you're on.
Is this a microphone? Oh, every time I'm Serene, it's just like, can I sing Twinkle Little Star? Anytime I'm like singing somewhere.
That's cute.
Oh.
Well, I'll just welcome us in. We don't need any banter.
Oh, this is our banter. Well, can we just at least, before you welcome people in, tell everybody this is our last episode of the season?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very bittersweet. I'm sad, but
oh, stop it! It was your idea, first of all. Okay, let's just be clear. Okay,
no, but it was 2 days ago, and we're planning. Okay, we got a podcast. We have to do this rally. Then we're going to Sacramento, and then what if the bill passes the hearing? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, and I'm just like. This just hit me all of a sudden that
you don't love the podcast anymore.
No, if I just sort of need a break, so that we're doing less, so that the most important thing that we could be doing, fighting the bill, I think we can put a little bit more time and energy into that. I know.
So just so everyone realizes, it wasn't my decision. I love you guys. And I like this podcast.
Okay, so it's only the season 1 finale, right? It is not the end of everything.
Is it the end of the vaccine conversation? That's what people want to know.
It is not. It is not. I hope we're going to be picked up by Fox or the WB. I'm hoping,
oh, definitely.
Hoping for season 2.
100%. Syndication even, right?
I know, yeah. No, but this is the season 1 finale, honestly.
We have to ask them, do they even want a season 2? We should ask. We should have people weigh in. Yeah.
Chime in.
We need to find out if you guys want a season 2, if you want us back.
I'm sure they do.
If the majority says yay on that, then we'll be back maybe, in end of July, beginning of August?
Yeah, I'm not sooner than a month probably, but I don't know how long do you spend between seasons, and it's so funny.
Depends on what the network says.
I know. It's like Matt told me, he's like, yeah, you sort of have to have an ending of season 1 and then start season 2. I'm like, well, when does that happen? He's like,
I told you
it happens whenever you want it to happen. But no,
so don't
I
be
was
sad.
I was just like I need just, I think, a little bit of time to just chill and spend a little bit. I've had,
You mean outside of the vacation you just took?
I know. So I just got back from 2 weeks vacation. I'm not going to try to hide the fact that we planned our family vacation, Cheryl and Joshua and I, and we went to Puerto Rico to visit friends, had a lot of fun there, and we went to the British Virgin Islands. No, the American Virgin Islands, St. Thomas, and stayed there, and then we cruise around the Virgin Islands a little bit, but I don't know. We just we had it planned way ahead of time, and had I known what was going to happen, we wouldn't have gone at this time. But it was.
But you did.
Yeah, we did. Well, family time's important too, and it was great to relax. And I think it was coming back to so much going on. I was like, oh
made you realize you needed a break. made you realize I need a vacation. There's just too much going on.
Yeah, so the vacation is the ending of season 1 of the podcast, and we will we're not going to tell you when we're going to come back, but we're going to surprise you. One morning you're going to wake up and ding, there's going to be a new episode waiting on your podcast app, all for you, and we'll be energetic and ready to go, and so anyway, so that's
and vacationed.
Yeah,
we will vacation.
Yeah.
Must be nice. I can't tell you the last time I've taken a vacation, but you know what? I'm going to do it this summer. Take the kids. Yeah. I'm going to go take the kids and have a vacation. I don't know how it's going to go. Yeah. But I'm going to try it. So, we will see, and then we'll be back. But anyway, why don't you, for the last time for season 1,
okay,
try not to cry when you do it, and why don't you welcome everyone in?
When you open the door for somebody else.
Welcome, everybody, to the vaccine conversation with Dr. Bob and Melissa.
I see the tear. I see it falling.
I know.
I see it.
No, it's the last episode of the season. Anyway,
is that a tear? Or those allergies again, Dr. Bob? The allergies when you're sick. Remember when you said that in one of the episodes?
Oh, I know.
You're like, when people say it's allergies, they're lying. They're sick.
They are lying. Yeah. Well, that was one favorite past moment of the episode.
It sure was.
Well, so, for today's, final episode, what is it called? Season finale of season 1. We thought we would not really actually have a topic. We were basically going to reminisce on sort of some of our favorite moments and favorite topics of this season. And then I want to kind of talk about some of the favorite topics that are coming up and maybe give a preview, not just the name of the topic, but maybe just, talk a little, for a few minutes about each of these upcoming topics so you guys know what you have to look forward to coming up. And
it sounds amazing.
Doesn't it?
It really does. I'll just say that we're in the middle of like a major hurricane right now in California, a political hurricane. So we decided or I should say, Dr. Bob insisted that we had this last moment here in the middle of everything else going on, just so that we could make sure and have a conclusive episode for this season. So, that should just show everybody how important they are. They are so important, right, to us to get this done. And we're here, even though we're totally stressed out with everything else going on. For this moment, we are all yours.
Yep,
so
exactly. Yep, so we can put down, we can't put down our cell phones because you're looking at topics.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, but my cell phone's on silent. And so, looking back, I was kind of thinking of, the why are we doing this episode that we started with. And for me, I don't even remember half of what we said, but for me, it's kind of morphed into why am I super excited about continuing this and, the drive to move forward as Melissa takes selfies of herself.
Hey, it's the end of season
commemorating. I know. Am I going to get in there? Should I come over to your chair this time?
Okay, go.
Okay, I'm coming over.
All right.
Selfie time. We'll post this.
Cheese. Don't look weird. Look normal. Cheese. Okay, we got a good picture. I'll show you guys. So at some point, I will show you and that other one got deleted. It went right to the trash. That was
okay.
Yeah.
Right, but honestly, things are turning so ugly in the political environment, and families who are either vaccine injured and don't continue to vaccinate, or families who from the beginning have adopted or embraced a natural lifestyle and have kind of figured out that there is some risk to vaccination, and some people even think their kids are going to be healthier if you don't vaccinate because you'll have a healthier immune system. Those families, they're basically now becoming a class of second-class citizens. They're being discriminated against politically, legally, socially, even between families and friends, and it's just turning into something that that saddens me and angers me as a society. So basically, I'm looking forward to more and more talking about that in season 2 and why are we going to continue to do this? And hopefully I hope we don't have to do this for 20, 30 years, but what if we do? What if the discrimination doesn't change?
What if you do? That's right.
Yeah, what if I
do? What if you do? Hey, we'll all be listening, Dr. Bob. So,
I don't know. What do you look back at, from some of these past episodes?
Well, it's funny because why we're doing this, when we first did that episode, we literally just came in, pressed record, and sort of had a brief idea, an outline of what we were going to talk about with no understanding of sort of how far that this podcast would reach. Mm-hmm. So I messaged you the other day. This has been listened to in 92 countries.
I know. That was so cool.
92 countries and over 300,000 downloads. And
I bet the people in France just loved my Inspector Clouseau and Ireland.
That actually sounded totally normal to them.
I know. And I bet Ireland was like, I didn't know.
One of ours is
Melissa was Irish.
She's amazing. One of ours. And so it's really funny because as we set out just 5-6 months ago to sort of start this, really, we had no idea that it was going to sort of take on the life that it has. And that life turned into 6 episodes and a whole amazing array of interactions, connections, comments, messages, and just togetherness with everybody in this movement. And it's been really, really, really great. Mm-hmm. One of my always one of my favorite things to talk about, and I almost feel like we could do this one again, media sound bites.
Yeah.
And I like media sound bites because we're literally talking about the phrases that you hear. And once you're aware of those phrases, like you start hearing them everywhere. So like if you hadn't thought about this before, and then you listen to our episode and we're talking about safe and effective, and we're talking about debunked, and the science is settled. And what else do we hear all the time? Oh, vaccines don't cause autism.
Yeah, vaccines are safe and effective. Did you say that?
Oh my gosh, are you not? Even on the last episode, you're not listening?
I was looking at like our statistics.
Oh, jeez. Poor Cheryl. Poor Cheryl.
If you're new to the podcast, that's happened quite a bit.
Herd immunity, 95% herd immunity. These kind of sound bites that... It's really interesting that once you pay attention to them, you will literally see them and hear them everywhere, in every single article, in every single newscaster piece, in every single radio interview. Everything you hear will have these sound bites. And, you know, what people really need to get is that these are like handed to them on a piece of paper to make sure that they're saying it. This is not like somebody's just spontaneously going, oh, well, they are safe and effective, so therefore I'm going to say that. It's like, here's what you're going to say in this broadcast that is not censored in any way or manipulated in any way. It's just universally independent news. But really, it's it has this formation to what the message is. And I find it really interesting. It's in other things too, not just the vaccine debate, obviously, but it's really interesting to pay attention to, because once you know those sound bites, you can pick them out everywhere. And that's always kind of like a fun thing to talk about. And we showed some examples, I believe, like some articles where they're talking, every time that we see those sound bites, we talked about it. So I think that's that was a useful podcast because I think it for people who are joining to listen to kind of like just get information, it sort of really helped them to see what was the greater picture about this conversation and why there's so much hostility and how the media shapes the public perception on this and also helps to support these like really, really strict legislation measures. And it all comes from what the media does, and the media has these same sound bites. So I found that interesting from a societal standpoint, how communications works, how, I was a sociology major. This is very interesting to me, how they use this to manipulate people. So if you guys came in late to the season, definitely go back. That was episode 2 and hear back. I don't know. I haven't listened to any of these old episodes. Have you?
Well, I listened to them originally. Yeah. Did you not listen?
I did.
Go back and re-listen.
But I mean, now it's like, I'm curious to sort of see what they sound like now as we've gone 50 episodes later. How about you? What's another one that you really liked?
I kind of found it interesting that you and I basically in November predicted that this law was going to happen, where we did the episode 5, attacking medical exemptions. And it was basically a study that showed that it does what a lot of studies do. The conclusion of the abstract of the study says, we have proven that there are lots of problems with vaccine medical exemptions in California, and we need to do something legally to change and to eliminate all these fraudulent vaccine medical exemptions.
Or else we will reduce any of the progress we've made from 277. That's what it said in there.
Yeah, and that was the conclusion. But then when you actually read the study, and what we did, we showed you the parts of the study where it showed they didn't reach that conclusion using the data from the study. They just made up that conclusion on their own because their data actually showed the opposite. They showed most of the people that they interviewed in the study found few or no problematic medical exemptions. And out of the 60 medical exemptions that the medical board had begun investigating, they did not find a single problem with any of those 60 medical exemptions.
And plus, the health officers that they interviewed, many of them said themselves that that they felt this shouldn't be part of their domain. That they really felt like they should be leaving this in the hands of the doctor, and it wasn't their responsibility to decide whether or not they're valid. And more importantly, what they were using to decide validity was all based on CDC contraindications, which is not what California law said. So the ones that they did think were problematic were only problematic because they didn't meet what they believed to be the criteria, which is the ACIP or CDC guidelines, which is what, of course, the current law is trying to change it too.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was, and I'm also frustrated with myself for, not kind of proceeding with the political fight way back then because we thought this might happen.
That's what you said. I remember.
Yeah. And so again, I've sort of told you guys in a later episode, one lesson you need to learn other states is don't wait for a vaccine bill to begin lobbying your legislators.
And to get organized.
Yeah, and get organized. Do it now. Start building those relationships now. So,
and speaking about state advice, the other thing I would say, and I know some other states have done a really great job at this, something that we have not done a great job at is having good unified leadership. And you've seen some of these other states really under one organization, and it's consistent and everything has kind of a fluidity to it. The problem with our state, with California, is that one, it's very large, lots of people.
Right.
And there were kind of lots of little like individual organizations and things before the laws started coming out, before 2109. And I think everybody sort of started to take their own and kind of go in their own direction and sort of quote unquote work together. But then there are a lot of problems with who thinks what should be said and who should be saying it. And all of that, I mean, we've actually heard that from legislators. I just heard that yesterday, that we were absolutely criticized for being disorganized and for being, what was the other word that they used? Disorganized, and just on the lobbying side of things, it was just not professional because the leadership, they said, was not there. And so I will say, for those other states who are not dealing with bills right now, you should be taking the off season time to be coming together. I'm going to sneeze and I can feel it. And it's kind of like, you see my face? I was like, I was right. Yes, I told you. Thank you.
Wait, are you sick or is that allergies?
It's allergies. No, I don't get sick. Remember our vitamin D episode?
Oh, yeah,
I got a lot of messages about that, by the way.
Oh, yeah, cool.
So I would say take the off season to get organized and unified. Have your regional groups if you're a large state like ours is. Do the legwork and that kind of stuff, not when you're under the gun of the bill. Have that stuff ready. And you know what? Put the egos aside, and everybody needs to come together under one unified group. I mean, you can still have your own groups, but one unified intention so that the infighting and all the drama and stuff doesn't happen, because that kind of stuff just totally takes away the energy of the people that are fighting. And ultimately, of course, we all want the same goal. But you know what? Sometimes, and I've said this to some of my friends, sometimes the solution is bigger than you. Like, it doesn't need to be your idea. It doesn't need to be you leading the reins. Sometimes you can take a step back and still be part of a greater solution that can have a better effect. And I would say, from both of these experiences, 277 and 276 now, 4 years apart, we see a lot of the same patterns and a lot of the same problems. Other states have contacted me and said, you know what, we didn't have any of this. Like, this is why we were so effective. And I would just encourage people as they move forward, because this is going to come up in every state eventually.
Right.
To focus on a unified leadership and focus on having your regional groups and all those things ahead of time, so that when it's go time, you're ready. You're ready to disseminate the information. You're ready to work on your data and get it out to everybody and start hitting your legislators and having the meetings in their local offices and the capital offices, et cetera. Don't make some of the same mistakes that, that we've seen and that kind of make it harder to be successful. And, we have different circumstances here. So it's hard because we've got such a big state with a very, very large Democratic majority in our legislature. And we have a very, I should say, powerful pharmaceutical lobby, I think, for California, maybe even more so than other states, because I feel like they're using this state as like this example and model. And
then people always kind of rag on the Democrats for bringing these mandatory vaccination laws forward. But honestly, in speaking with people, it's not the Democratic constituents.
Of course,
it's 100% the Democratic legislators. It's the majority of Democratic legislators that basically vote along this party line, even if they don't agree with the bill or don't like the bill. But when you're talking to Democratic people who's on the street, they're like, what the heck? The government wants to control my medical care. The government wants to tell me what to do with my body. Heck no.
Or they understand.
It's interesting how removed the legislators are from the Democratic
from the people that they
Party.
represent. Yeah, I mean, I always considered myself a Democrat before, also, and I think you're right. Most Democrats you talk to will be totally fine with understanding. Oh my gosh, your child had a reaction. Yes, they should be protected. This is ridiculous. Like that's not what they support when they're supporting, certain even public health measures. They're not supporting that level of intrusiveness and invasiveness and discrimination and segregation. That's not what they want. And even the legislators, who knows if they're really supporting those ideas either. What they're doing, like you're saying, is voting party line, and the party has signed on to a pharmaceutical agenda. Yeah. And so that has forced every single person to sort of toe the line, so to speak. Right. And it's been a hard process.
Yeah.
But I'll say my next favorite episode I really liked was episode 6, Media, Measles, and Misinformation. Not just because of that catchy title that I came up with.
Do you know how many titles I come up with that I thought were so wonderful? And Melissa's just like, no.
This is what for this episode, your title would have been like, the media in our country and the measles of the disease that's existing right now and the misinformation of the public that media is giving under the construct of our country. Like that would literally, and then you'd be like, how's that? Is that catchy? And I'd be like, no. No, it has way too many words. I think that's why every time he gives me these titles that are just like really like, it looks like it'd be a library book. And it's not really that, even if the content is technical, like you still obviously want the title to sort of summarize in an interesting way. Right. But you know this, and I've said this maybe on the podcast, I really like our social conversations that we have about not like chatting, like what'd you do yesterday? Like not that kind of, I mean, social, like the social ramifications of the vaccine debate as a whole, as a conversation for our country and for the world. And this episode of Media, Measles, and Misinformation was the first time, remember, this was pre-measles mania here. This is when Europe was having their beginning of their outbreak. And we called it, right? We said this is going to lead to a U.S. outbreak. And I love breaking down articles and looking through them and going, here's where they're using the catchphrases. Here's where they're inflating or using the wrong or inaccurate data. Here's where they're scaring you into thinking this. Here's where they're leaving out the other half of the story. And that's kind of what we did on this. And
it's like, measles is fatal in about 1 in 10,000 childhood cases. And measles, when you look at an entire population, when children and adults catch measles, it's fatal in about 1 in 500,000 members of a population. But what the CDC will tell you is no, measles is fatal in between 1 in 500 and 1 in 1,000 cases, again, because they're just skewing the numbers. They're not looking
even
at the
though
numbers
we've now
accurately.
Seen several thousand cases in the U.S. and still have not had
many years. Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah. And that kind of ties into the flu vaccine. We sort of did the same thing, talking about the flu and the media, because this was the flu vaccine, first one was the end of November. So this was right in the middle of flu season. And there was a lot of, propaganda on the flu and the flu season, how deadly it is, and 80,000 deaths the year before. I remember all those things that they were saying. Yeah. So this kind of tied into the measles conversation because it was talking about the media machine and how they teach people to fear certain diseases, and how they really increase the attention to death and the mortality from those diseases, and they put the only solution right onto the hands of the vaccine. That's the only way you can prevent this. If you don't, you're going to die. Yeah. And then we see the same themes in all the articles and media across the board during those times. I find those really interesting. As flu season comes up, it always starts again.
Yeah, and I liked the another social topic was why are more highly educated people more likely to question vaccines?
But I'm sorry, why did you skip over the really interesting and exciting episode, Overview of Vaccines and Diseases for Infants, Part 1, 0 to 6 months? Are you suggesting that wasn't one of your favorites? That was like, I mean, come on. That was just like...
And how fascinating was the title of that episode, too?
It was the best part. If that tells you anything.
So sometimes we're here just to educate, give you just plain old information.
And again, disclaimer, I'm kidding everyone. I know.
But I'm curious, I want to know, what was your favorite disease episode, would you say, that you got the most out of? Maybe that things you didn't know, or things that, we had flu, of course. We had measles. We had whooping cough. We had meningococcal.
I think meningococcal was
tetanus,
more interesting, probably the most interesting to me, because I felt like that was one of the ones I would sit and consider.
Yeah.
More than some of the other ones, especially as my kids have aged out of some of the younger ones and the risks for some of the other ones. I like all of our measles discussion, but I like more of the other aspects of it, not just the disease and the vaccine.
And what's interesting, I just want to chime in, we're seeing a lot of meningococcal B vaccine commercials now. Even though the meningococcal vaccine we use covers A, C, Y, and W strains. The B strain vaccine is not one that we use in routinely on the schedule, but the B strain of meningococcal disease is one of is probably the most common strain of infections that we see in the United States, especially among younger children.
So why is that?
But not so much in teens, but a lot in younger children. They have not been able to figure out how to make the meningococcal B vaccine work well.
That's right.
In children. So they've never adopted it. They've never approved it. So then the question is, why are we seeing commercials? We're seeing commercials because it's not a vaccine that the CDC has accepted on their regular schedule. It's not on their recommended schedule yet. So these pharmaceutical companies are out there saying, hey, this vaccine exists. The CDC won't recommend it yet. Let's put it straight to the consumers.
Yeah.
So even though meningococcal B is most common in younger kids where the vaccine doesn't work, they're advertising it to teens and adults, saying, "Hey, ask your doctor about this vaccine." So I just kind of find that kind of.
So you would essentially have to get 2 different meningococcal vaccines
if you're going to get coverage from all the different strains
as a teen.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Was that interesting?
It was, but go back to your highly educated one.
Well, yeah, I'm just fascinated. Again, it all comes down to, more highly educated parents are more likely to question vaccines. And that's really, I think, pharma and the CDC and the medical industry's greatest fear is that they don't want parents to be educated. We've read things and even talked about it, says where we don't encourage parents to get more educated about vaccines, and we don't want to give them too much informed consent, and they want them to view vaccines as automatic. We don't want people to investigate it. And because the second that anyone starts to read any sort of scientific information on vaccines that's outside of the media package, then they start to see the risks of vaccination. And then they get more educated, more informed, and they tend to not follow the whole schedule.
Not comply. Yeah, they just don't comply.
That's their greatest fear.
Yeah, and it had some really good data in it as well, because it wasn't just an opinion. That had actual data and studies that talked about the higher educated, quote, vaccine hesitant people. I think one of the episodes that I've gotten the most positive feedback on was our episode on natural herd immunity and artificially vaccine-induced human immunity.
And I will take credit kind of just for that sort of comparison. I can take credit for so little of this podcast that I feel like when something really was my idea, I just want to say.
And it came in, what's the word I'm looking for? It came in handy. That's an expression, right? Yeah. We ended up utilizing this theory a lot when the first Washington measles outbreak started. And this idea of what natural immunity, the model for natural immunity looks like with a measles outbreak compared to what we typically see in the United States with a typically vaccinated, almost all vaccinated population. And so that comparison was interestingly something we have not seen in the United States with the measles outbreak, what we saw in Washington, because it was a very contained group. It was almost like its own little study that you could look at. And again, there were no infants under 1 that had measles and maybe 3 adults who were probably, I want to say, not in that community.
And there was almost no hospitalization.
One hospitalization. Yeah. And they were all age appropriate cases. And when people were like shocked by the post I made on that really kind of was, people were very interested in that. They were shocked about the data and the statistics on that. And then it all came back to this idea, well, this is a natural immunity model versus artificially induced vaccine immunity. And what does that look like? And what's the difference there? And that kind of opened up that conversation. And I know I referred a lot of people back to this podcast to discuss that, because I think if you are in this movement and you're listening to this podcast, you really need to understand the concept of what natural immunity looks like and what artificially induced vaccine immunity looks like, and how they are different. And how they are different as a society, in a population.
And the problems that a society will have to encounter down the road when you opt in to the artificial herd immunity model. And it's not just going to automatically eliminate every single disease and everything's going to be happy and bright and shiny 50 years from now. You will run into problems when you've tried to eliminate.
It doesn't create lifelong immunity. Right. So it's like it doesn't do exactly what natural immunity does. So I think that to understand the concept of herd immunity, which we keep hearing, in fact, it was added to the bill, right? They actually use the words herd or community immunity. To understand for that to be the basis of why they're passing these really strict laws that discriminate and segregate and remove rights. It's all comes down to this idea of herd immunity. But the idea of herd immunity, if you like master nothing during the off time for our podcast listeners, if you master nothing else, you should really try to learn more about this concept of herd immunity and when it began, somewhere around 1933. What's that guy's name? Hedrick. A doctor. He first came up with this idea of herd immunity, witnessing in populations what percentage on average needed to have that coverage to prevent outbreaks, and how it related to natural immunity, of course, and how that number was 68%. And that number was not 95%. That was never part of the plan. That was never part of the idea of vaccination, that it would need to be at 95% in order for it to work.
Right.
And I think that if you can really understand and master this idea of herd immunity, that when you have someone that comes to you and says, well, we need to have our rates higher because of, herd immunity, that you can actually have a conversation with them about what herd immunity means and what it was really based off of. It was a real theory, but the theory wasn't based on a population with waning immunity and primary vaccine failure. Right. And, that's not what it was made on. And so we're kind of in a position as a society now that we've never been in before. And we don't know what that's going to look like. And they couldn't predict what it's going to look like because they never, we'd never been here. So there's really no way for anybody to have said, this is what we need, because we don't know. We don't know what we need. Right. What we know is that it's not really working and people are getting hurt. That's what we know. That's really all we know, right? Is that it's not completely working. They're not safe for everyone. They're not effective for everyone.
Yeah. And then we did like a later, more recent episode that highlighted the problems we're running into now with measles, that when you use a vaccine like the measles vaccine to try to create artificial immunity, we are now creating adult outbreaks. And we're completely seeing that. 80% of the California cases are in adults. A lot of them were immunized, were vaccinated when they were younger. We are basically seeing what all these studies predicted many years ago. So it's very interesting. Topics. How about JB Hanley?
Love that. Well, I just love him.
So cool. Yeah.
In fact, I miss him. I'm so sad that he's been on his Facebook hiatus for now several months, because I like his thought-provoking every time.
Okay.
It's there. Every single time.
It is.
Why?
You know what? Occasionally it wasn't. And you know what?
Do you do this in the office?
It's got to be something dietary. Because
no kidding. Duh. I told you that every time.
Because on vacation, it occurred to me, I'm like, gosh, I'm not clearing my throat very much.
Does that happen to you typically?
You know what? I do.
Like in the office, are you doing that with people?
I think it depends. It really depends on what I ate. So I think I mean, I love my super vitamin. It kind of perks me up, but I think it kind of coats my throat with a little something that makes me a little.
You guys, this is every podcast. It's every single.
Anyway,
time.
so what was I saying? JV Handley.
I don't know. You were clearing your throat.
But we definitely have to have him back because we didn't get to the later parts of his book.
And I want to know. I want to know
how to end the autism epidemic, and
but I also want to know what he's been up to and stuff because he's always doing something really effective. He's a super smart guy. I love his approach to this and his approach to how he writes and the things he finds important, and he always offers some really good things. So that was fun to have someone on. That was fun, and then it, of course, later with Dr. Thomas Cowan was awesome.
That was so cool.
It's really cool. I wish more doctors. So doctors, if you're listening. Other doctors, specialists, even if you're not, a pediatrician or even a general practitioner, if you are a doctor and you're listening to this and you want to be on this podcast for season 2, you can be on anonymously. I'm totally fine with that. We understand what this hostile climate can do to people, but I would love to hear more from doctors and specialists who kind of want to share maybe something about what they've seen as it relates to this debate, this conversation, maybe some particular scientific work that they're doing or what they've studied and their personal experience. So if you are interested or you think your own doctor or friend or family member who's a doctor would be interested, again, you can totally be anonymous. So I know that's going to appeal to a few of you who've contacted me already. Message me on Facebook because I would love to have you on. I'm always really interested to learn from people with different experience. Obviously, like we chat a lot, so I know a lot of what you talk about because we chat a lot, but it's so fun to have other people because they're providing new information and a new perspective, and I find that stuff really interesting. So I look forward to on season 2 having more guests, and I know you guys will love that as well.
Yeah, I think people like the guests because I learn something every time. I think it's fascinating, and it's great to have that extra element, and it's I don't know, different than just sitting talking to you all the time.
I know I bore you. I get it. I like the breastfeeding episode. I just wanted to mention that because I know you'll probably skip over that one. I think it was a really important reminder that medicine is not the only way to keep our children healthy, and that it does kind of start from the beginning, and our body and the immune systems are trained to sort of have what they need from the mother. And again, if breastfeeding is not something you're able to do, look at donor milk. The ability to kind of give your child breast milk, I should say, is the most important thing if that is something that you can do and should really, really, really try to do, because I find it to be so important. And then I like how we tied in all the studies that talk about the reduction in infectious disease specifically because of breast milk. It's not just, it gives you vitamins and nutrition and it's good for, but it was talking about scientifically on this vaccine discussion. It was talking about the diseases we're trying to prevent with vaccines. Many of them are preventable based on data through breastfeeding. So that was good. Yeah,
and one piece of feedback I got that I've heard this before when you're talking about breastfeeding and the reduction of diseases. Some of the people are sort of maybe a little bit more into breastfeeding education. They actually like to turn it around and say, what's the risk of not breastfeeding?
Yeah,
and instead of saying breastfeeding cuts the risk of catching, diarrhea by half, they like to say not breastfeeding doubles your chance that you're gonna catch catch diarrhea. But in order to do that, you have to basically do the math on every study and every statistic and turn around. So we didn't make the attempt to do that, but I would almost say you really should look, since breastfeeding is by default the norm. And
it's not an option. It's not like the optional choice.
Right. It's like you breastfeed, and then the option you would take would be to not breastfeed.
Right.
Therefore, what risk does that then, impose versus what's the benefit of breastfeeding?
Totally.
The benefit of breastfeeding is that's just normal life. That's just your normal.
Well taken.
Well, thank you.
Male. That was a point well taken about females.
I gotta write that down. I think that's the 4th time you said that to me since I've known you.
Kudos to you, Dr. Bob. That was sensational. I like it.
I gotta say, I know you're teasing me now, but
no, it was a good point.
No, there's an episode we did that I don't remember what episode it was, but I was listening back, and hearing more deeply what you were saying. I was
you mean listening?
Yeah, listening. And I was listening. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a great point, or that was a fantastic.
About yourself? You mean?
No,
you. Oh.
No,
totally
no, about you. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, and I just moved right on. I just moved right on to my next point. Because I'm thinking, okay, when she's wrapped up with her point, I'm going to say something. But no,
funny.
I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could go back and insert. That was a fantastic one. I bet the listeners know what episode I'm talking about, because it was so, when I went back and I listened, I'm like, oh my gosh, you just hit the nail on the head. And then I moved right on to something else. So anyway, I will try to listen more.
That is well, you know what the difference? Active listening.
Yes.
Not hearing, but active listening.
What's the difference about...
Did you hear me?
About how I am.
Well, I don't know. Typically I think because if you're like on your iPad, like scrolling to the next thing, you're like, and then you're just like, so I know you're not listening. And then the other way I know you're not listening is when the next time you talk, you say one of the things I just said.
I know.
That's a very obvious way to be like, okay, you weren't listening.
Anyway,
at all.
but I appreciate your points. And
well, now I want to know what episode that was.
I know.
when did I hit the nail on the head? I want to know.
Well, what else was interesting?
We talked about, getting into censorship was cool. Actually, the CDC, getting into a little bit of the conflicts of interest, and that was cool. And the censorship coming up, that issue was time sensitive, I think.
Yeah.
And then Japan, I like talking about Japan.
Yeah,
that was cool.
Japan was really cool.
Remember who brought that study to the
I know,
table?
Melissa.
And do you remember how I told you after the podcast? I was like, you were saying all the points I wanted to say. I'm like, I brought this study to the table. I wanted to talk about it because this was such a cool find. I accidentally found this study because I was looking up encephalitis and measles, and it brought me to this study about how Japan's vaccine program was set up, and it was really cool. Overview of how they approach immunization there, and there were so many great points. And of course, I had gone through the study way before you because I'm highlighting and marking all these different things. And like as we're going through it, you're like, and another thing that was interesting, and you're like reading off exactly like what I was. And I had like 3 stars next to it, so that was like the one I like really wanted to say. And I'm like, oh, and then the thing was I couldn't say anything like while we were recording.
Okay. But you know what? I'm hereby officially giving you permission that if there is like something that we're working on together, or you bring it, or even I bring it, but I will totally admit you always say things better than I do.
No, that's not always true.
Almost always true. So if there's a point that I start to make, and that was one of your 3-star points.
But you were just like reading it. You're just reading it, but it was like such a good part. And it's like, I wanted to bring that to our listeners. I wanted them to know that I found this great nugget. Because what's funny is, most of the studies we bring really tend to be me. I don't know why that's the case. You probably read a lot more studies than I do.
I don't like looking for studies.
Yeah. Because I would love for you to bring a study, because then I can look at it and I can go, wow, this is really interesting. But of course, the ones I'll bring, I've already read them. So by the time we get here, I just want to, summarize all these good points. And then it was really funny. That's that one. Yeah. I remember when we left, I was like, I was saying it like in a playful way, but secretly I was like,
but I bet I tend to sometimes be too superficial with it. Or I might not go deeper into the point. So you should always I think jump in or add on to if I just reading it from the study, you should then take it. And
I'm just not going to show you the study next time. I'm going to bring it to the podcast and you'll have to hear it live so we can just hear your responses to the study. And then that way I get to say all those good points. But then I'll let you do the same for your studies. Deal?
Yeah, deal.
He'll never bring a study.
Exactly. I mean, we had a couple of similar episodes. Why do pediatricians kick you out for not vaccinating? And then what happens when doctors ignore your child's vaccine reaction? And we had a visitor. We had a guest come in and share her story, and that was I think very interesting to me to be able to talk about that. What else? I mean,
well, skipping ahead kind of a bit, I really like the toxic sludge PR conversation. That was awesome because I'm so interested.
I just love the title of that. And that's the title of the book.
It's called Toxic Sludge is Good for You.
Yeah. And Other Truths. Yeah. I think I came up with Other Truths.
Yeah, I think you did. Other truth, because those are my truth posts.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny.
But I like discussing the PR aspect of this vaccine debate. Again, this goes back to the media and manipulation and sound bites and all that. This is all part of the same conversation that I find fascinating. Yeah. Because like today, when some new articles came out, the governor supports the bill. I'm like, you know what? People are freaking out about it, saying, how come the truth is, this literally could be media manipulation.
Right.
Nobody got a word from him that, yes, this is totally, I support it. He might not even know what the final language looks like. He might not have thought the final language meant what it did, because I can't imagine he would approve it with the way that these amendments came in. But you know what? If you work in a certain senator's office and you contact your LA Times person or your SACB person, you email them and go, we need a story. We need a story saying that the governor supports it. They put out a story. The headline says the governor signs on to this new bill as if it's a done deal. Yeah. And the truth is we don't know where that came from and if he really did support it. And that's the way that media manipulation and the PR machine works. Right. And they're doing it maybe even to put pressure on the governor, to force him to say yes now that they've put these articles out. Yeah. Or maybe they're doing it to convince the assembly members who are going to have a hearing that the governor already supports it, so you might as well too. All of this stuff is like, part of this big coordinated effort, like we always say. And I love dissecting that and discussing it and just talking about it. Of course, we don't know the final answers, but I love to discuss it. I think it's really interesting to me.
Yeah, and that idea, it's so timeless. Because I'm maybe laughing at myself, but we see that kind of thing on TV. It's so obvious when we see the media manipulating things on television and movies, but even in books. Some of the books I read, even like science fiction novels that are talking about stories 2,000 years from now. There's one book I read, and the entire book was pretty much about media manipulation of politics and the government and how they totally shifted a whole nation's policy based on the media manipulation. And it's so obvious when you're reading it or watching it, but honestly, when you're living it, I think the public buys it and they don't realize they're being manipulated. And that's why you've paid so much attention to that issue on this.
And then, of course, I loved our interview with Forrest, talking about the moth and the iron lung. And just actually, more than just that, even this idea that there could be another theory behind all this, I thought was really fascinating. And when I read that book, it was so awesome. Yep. And then I did get a lot of messages about the immune system episode. A lot of people really liked immunity, talking about immunity and what kind of supplements and vitamins to be taking, and that they appreciated that. I'm sure we should definitely do that again, season 2.
Yeah, and I guess since we just posted the other episodes, we don't really need to recap them, do we?
No, but I will say the last one of my favorites was the medical board episode.
Yeah, I got a lot of thanks and feedback from that.
You know what I liked about that episode is that it was uncomfortable. I like that. Like, it wasn't uncomfortable really at the time. Like, it didn't feel like that to me. Yeah. But I'll just tell everybody, like, after it was over, Dr. Bob was a little concerned that I might have come across as too harsh and pushy and maybe mean and whatever, all the things that, because I'm a target often for reviews that are not so positive, because everybody loves Dr. Bob and you're a man and you have a degree and those things make you infallible. And so
no, but our listeners
I know, I'm just
after
kidding.
Like 10 minutes into the first episode, I know they've grown to love you.
Everybody has been really great. But what I like, it was really funny, because what did I write back to? I was like, honestly, I think you're going to make a much bigger deal of it if we say that. I think it's funny that you were so worried. I realized it's okay to be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's okay for something to feel like this is not scripted and easy, light, everything like we always do. It's all diplomatic all the time. And honestly, like we hardly ever get into arguments, you and I. Like we don't have that kind of like argumentative dynamic. Right. But it wasn't argumentative. No. But it was like you said, it had that little uncomfortable, or I was pushing you, but I had a lot of people message me and they were like thanking me for that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I got messages, saying they were glad that you.
Yeah. Or they were okay with it. They thought it was, they thought it was cool that it was something different. It wasn't just the typical, everybody's fine. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, exactly.
It was going into something and it felt real because it was real. Mm-hmm. And I like those kind of episodes. I like those kind of discussions, and I'm not afraid to have those discussions. And of course, everybody knew my intentions are always great, behind that push. So it wasn't like just to be argumentative. It was literally to bring something good out. That was the idea. But I got tons in person too. I got tons of people that mentioned like, I really liked that episode. And how different it was and how just raw and honest that it was. Yeah. So I think we should have some more of those kinds of things that maybe aren't totally scripted, which we do most of the time, but it might be kind of nice to have that sometimes.
All right.
So I think we'll kind of maybe stop there so that we can give people something to look forward to for our second part.
Yeah, a 2-part season finale.
Season 1 finale, part 2. Yeah. I love it.
How cool is that? I mean,
it's so cool.
You're always so sad about season finales, but when it's a 2-parter, you're like, it's not really
It's not totally over. It's not over yet.
And what I'll do is I'll usually save the second part to watch right before the next season starts.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I'm like, I know what's going on, but you guys don't have to do that.
But okay. All right.
Yeah, so we will...
we'll be back.
Yeah.
With another episode.
So we don't have to have a long
Don't
goodbye.
Don't say goodbye.
We're gonna
no tears. No tears. Nothing's happening now. So see you soon.
Right.
How about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
We're gonna be the peace we wanna see in the world. Yeah, be the peace we wanna see in the world. Yeah, be the love we wanna see in the world. Be the joy we wanna see in the world. Be the change we wanna see in the world.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.